Okay. Um, Bernard, welcome to the Robert R. Cole's Long Island History Room of the Glenn Cove Public Library. I am Lydia Wen, and your other interviewer today is Carol Stern. We're both librarians here.
Correct.
Today is Wednesday, February the 9th of 2022. We're so excited to have you to do this interview for the Veterans History Project to be housed at the Library of Congress.
Okay.
So we're going to start off the interview with some biographical details.
Sure.
And then move on to the early days of your service,
Okay.
followed by wartime service, and then reflections of
Okay.
your service time. So let's get started. Where were you born?
Glenn Cove,
What year?
1930.
Who were your parents, and what were their occupations?
My mother was, you want the name? Sarah. Sarah Gordon. And my father was Bernard Farnan.
What were their occupations?
My mother, I'm a first generation. Well, my mother and father came from Ireland. And my mother was a chambermaid here in Glen Cove back in the 20s, 1920s. My father also came in the 1920s. He was a mason, bricklayer, stonemason. My mother was a chambermaid with the family. What is the famous family that has the? I always forget. Smithers.
Smithers.
Smithers from Red Spring Colony. They have that where they rehabilitation center from Mrs. Smithers took that over for her son. Their family members were alcoholics and narcotic. They had a lot of problems with them, and they started the Smithers Institute.
Oh, wow, Smithers Institute.
Right.
And where was that?
Well, it was on the island. It's a big one. I know they donate. They have an offspring of the family, the Smithers, has that big home as you're going towards Oyster Bay with the big pond and the big castle-looking area. That's the Smithers Institute. Big people like Strawberry and people in athletics and in Hollywood have been through the Smithers Institute
I've never heard of it.
for rehabilitation. Yeah, it's very, very well known. If you Google it, you'll get all kinds of background.
Bernard, did your parents meet here, or were they married?
They met here.
They met here.
Correct.
Did you have any siblings?
Yes,
Their names?
I had. There were 4 boys in the family and 1 girl. I had a brother John, a brother William, a brother Joe, and a sister Catherine.
Were any of them in the military?
My brother John was in the military, and my brother William were in the military.
Are you the youngest sibling?
I'm the oldest,
You're the old, and you survived everybody.
and my youngest brother Joseph, he's the one that's still alive.
Uh-huh.
My sister Catherine worked on TV with Tex and Jinx Falkenberg years ago in the beginning of television. She was on worked for them for years. I don't know whether you ever heard of Tex and Jinx.
I haven't.
They were,
I'm going to take a note
They
and
were a
look them
talk.
up.
There were a couple who had a talk program in the afternoons, and they were at the infancy of television. And my sister was very good friends with Humphrey Bogart, Ray Milland,
Oh, my
Clark
goodness.
Gable, Katharine Hepburn, all of them.
So
Of course,
did you ever get to meet any of these people?
Jinx Falkenberg was located over in Manhasset. She's the one that donated a lot of the land to the hospital, Northwell Hospital, all that property over there. She's passed away, of course.
Ben,
Huh?
when you joined the service, what were your siblings and your parents' feelings about that?
Okay, I didn't join. I was drafted.
You were drafted.
I recognized that I was going to be drafted,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't know what part of the service to get involved in. I was a neophyte as far as the military was concerned. A lot of my friends joined the Navy
Mm-hmm.
because they did not want to be in battle with the Army or the Marines. So I just waited to be drafted.
At the time, you were 20, 21?
21.
21.
Most of the people from the Glen Cove area, from Nassau County, were getting drafted at 21 because we had enough individuals to fill in up to the age of 21. When I got into the service, I recognized that most of the people that came from other states were drafted at 18. They didn't have the population as New York in order to satisfy the quotas for the draft. So a lot of the fellows that were drafted when I was drafted were younger than me by 2 or 3 years.
So they would have just been coming out of high school.
Correct.
So where were you? Were you studying? Were you working when you were drafted?
I was working.
Can you tell us what you were doing?
Yes, I was working as a cement finisher in construction. Part of the trade that I learned from my father
So in this area.
in the Glen Cove, Nassau County area. And playing semi-pro football here in Glen Cove.
Glen Cove had a semi-pro football league?
Football league. Semi-pro football league, if you recognize, was very big in those days. We would get it anywhere from 7 to 10,000 people at the games.
Oh my
because
goodness.
there was no television for the National Football League. It didn't exist. So semi-pro football was big for all the people in local areas. They recognized that it gave them an activity to tend to. You got to remember, we're going back into 49 and 50 and 51. It's a different life.
Right.
So when you were drafted, and you being the oldest son, was everyone at home at the time?
Yes. And of course, I was a big contributor to the family monetarily, with 5 in the family and 4 siblings at home. So that affected my family financially. As a matter of fact, when I went into the service, I was getting $80 a month, and I had $40 of that sent to my mother. So I was only getting $40 a month. I figured I could do well on the card games and the crap games.
And supplement your income that
Yeah,
way?
right.
Can you tell us a little bit about your initial point of entry?
My initial point of entry that took place on Whitehall Street down in New York, and from there they shipped, I'm trying to think, that's a great question. I think they shipped us to Chicago, and from Chicago we went out of Repo-Depot to go to our home base where we were going to have our training, which ended up at Fort Knox, Kentucky.
Fort Knox, Kentucky.
Right.
At Fort Knox, what kind of training and schooling did you receive?
I got reconnaissance training as a reconnaissance scout.
And how long did that last?
That lasted, because of me going in the week after Thanksgiving. They did little or no training at that time because it was between 2 holidays. So really we were just getting acclimated to Fort Knox. So the basic training was really a 16-week cycle, which started after Christmas.
Do you have any vivid memories of your training? Like, what was the best part? What was the worst part?
Well, What amazed me when I got there and got into the barracks, um, I it would startled me again because a number of we had some mixed in the barracks that were young, some who were married, most were single. It amazed me that so many of them couldn't acclimate to being away from their families, would cry at night. And I was astonished because during my time before I got drafted at 21, when the winter would come, it would be difficult to have work. So I would head for Florida and work in Florida. And as a matter of fact, I had to get my draft card in Miami, Florida, when I was 18 years old. So I was used to being away from home and working all of the time.
What kind of work did you do in Florida?
Any kind of work I could pick up. I worked with tinsmiths, I caddied, went to the racetracks. Whenever we hit a good racehorse, we'd get new clothes, new outfits. I went to the Mardi Gras. I went to Cuba on a banana boat. Cost $16.95 in those days out of Miami. I took my wife back in 2001 to Cuba. I went down as a bird watcher, which was illegal.
Did you say it was illegal?
It was illegal to go to Cuba in 2001.
Yes, correct.
You will get fined.
Right.
So I went down as a bird watcher.
There was a purpose for the
yes.
trip.
So do you-
I made
Educational.
myself the treasurer of a bird watching
Oh,
society.
how funny.
And I went down as a bird watcher
Do you
to
actually
Cuba.
do you bird watch, or that's not even a hobby?
I
of yours?
don't bird
You
watch,
just
no. But I bird watched. I had a helmet on and goggles and shorts and stockings up. You know, I played the role and wrote a big thing up because I did not want them to stamp my passport. And they stamped the thing that I had in my list that I was the treasurer, and that if the bird watching and the nesting and procedures and where they would migrate to the States, it came enough, I'd bring down thousands of bird watches. So I preyed on their greed and they stamped my
funny.
letter.
Were there any particular instructors that stood out in your mind?
Any question? What?
Any of your instructors during the training?
The instructors that we had were rather harsh because they were Korean veterans. Don't forget, I was there in 1951. So the 1950 Korean veterans had a horrible time in Korea. Korea was really two fashions of war. The 1950 group was the mobile group that got almost pushed off the peninsula. And then when MacArthur came and did the roundabout and chased them all the way to the Yellow River at that time, and then the Chinese got into the war, then it became a trench fair war, like World War I. All of my fighting was done at night when I was there in 1951 on patrols, where you black out and you go out and meet the enemy in no man's land. So there really was a mobile war and a trench type war like World War I. A trench right across, like the Great Wall of China, a trench right across Korea, where you were dug in with bunkers and rats, you know, all there, and that kind of a life. So I was in I got there in 1952, of June of 52.
What changed it? Do you know? Like
Pardon?
what changed it from mobile to trench?
What changed it
precipitated?
was when MacArthur chased all of the up to the Yellow River, and he did not realize he wanted to go into China. Truman did not want him to go into China. The Chinese were poised across the river, all camouflaged, waiting to see what MacArthur was going to do. And when MacArthur still made rumblings that he was going to go into China, they came across the Yalu River and invaded and came into North Korea and pushed the American soldiers back again until they all decided on the 38th parallel. And that's where they dug the trench, and that's where they set up. So it was like these two lines here, they had a trench across, we had a trench across, and we would meet in the middle at nights. And that's where most of the fighting would take place. Unless when the Chinese tried to overrun our lines, you know, when they hit our barbed wire or minefields, try to overrun our lines. Most of our fighting was at nights then at that time. From 52 to 53 when the war was over. Remember, it was only 3 years. But in that 3 years, we lost almost 37,000 people were killed.
The instructors that you had, you said they came back.
They were very harsh.
Very
You know,
harsh.
they were angry from their time over. So they took it out on us.
What did they do to you that you thought was harsh?
It was just the way they treated you. They treated you, you know, as not being civilized. It was, you know, they were not, most of them did not have any college education or a degree of, you know, of deportment and degree of decorum. It was just that they were just angry and they wanted to make all of us as angry as they were.
Sounds
They
pretty
didn't.
awful.
They didn't do anything physically, you
Uh-huh.
know, but they put you through a physical grind, no question. So, but that was the time of the day. Don't forget, after World War II, they never thought there was going to be a war
Yeah.
again, and we were using all of their weapons. Half of them didn't work. I mean, they never. After World War II, the money wasn't put into the defense of our country. Every Jeep that we had was from World War II. Every weapon that we had on our hands was from World War II. So, you know, the archives, that's what we were fighting with. I mean, today they're really, you know, they're computerized and everything else. They have every type of item, you know, to defend themselves. When they got over there, they didn't even find out, they didn't realize what the climate was like. It would go to 40 below. And they eventually got, and it would go to 120 or 130 in the summer with the monsoons. So they just got thrown. They only came in with those thermal boots because so many people were getting frostbite and losing their feet. Matter of fact, they had one fellow, that black guy, Ben Williams, that worked with City Hall. He lost his leg and foot before I was over there. He was there in 50. And rotted right off.
That must have been a scary time for you.
Yeah, it was. You know, you were all scared. You know, but you know, you had to take it as it came. It was a tough war, and it was a tough setting.
What was the hardest part of your training?
The hardest part of the training, I think, was trying to keep the spirit and the morale of the guys that we were training with up. And us older guys were able to do that, you know. We had a lot of them that were depressed. We kind of thought, myself and the guys that I hung around, we kind of felt that we were earmarked for Korea. Because if they pushed us, the guys that I hung out, we pushed back a little bit. Whereas other guys didn't. A lot of them went to Germany. At that time, there was shipment. You had to fill quotas. You had to fill quotas in Korea, and we also had a big complement of people over in Germany, as you well know. We still have them over there, and that was only 5 years after the War II was over. So we were sending a lot of people to Germany. We pretty much knew the guys that were going to Germany, and the guys that, well, like myself, were going to Korea. We had a pretty good idea, because we were getting evaluated, and if they tried to push us too much, we would push back. So we didn't have the greatest name, and you know, the training thing. So it was a foregone conclusion and we were going to Korea, which happened to all the guys I hung with and dealt with. We were a little bit of the older guys and the guys that had been around on the street, the New York guys, you know, that knew what was going on.
The 21-year-olds
Yeah.
versus the 18-year-olds.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you had been away from home. You went down to Florida to do work, so you
Right.
were accustomed to being at
Right.
home. And some of the other men had always been home, and this was their first time away for their
And
families.
they had a tough time.
Yeah.
They had a tough time. Not only did they have a tough time being separated from home, but they had a tough time eating the meals.
He talked a
I
little bit
mean,
about
you know,
that.
that's the cafeterial type of meals, you know, you come through and they hit you with things. Or, I mean, it didn't bother me. I'd go for seconds. You know, I had been living on my own, you know, in Florida for 2 or 3 years, back and forth every winter. So there were times that were when I was in Florida, we just went down and met the banana boat, and that's all we had for a week or two, you know. But then, so it wasn't bad for me, but a lot of these guys couldn't eat that food or acclimate to it, you know. They got special dispensation with their families, you know, all special meals made for some of them. I didn't have that way in my own family, you know, with 5 brothers. So
So
it was
that-
hard for them. you
So
know.
that part wasn't hard for you. What
No.
what was hard for you?
No,
to acclimate
there
to?
wasn't really anything hard for me because, you know, I played football and I worked hard in construction. And there really wasn't. The thing that was hard for me was the cadre that we had that, you know, were training us. They thought that that was the best way to toughen us. They didn't have to toughen the guys that I was with.
So let's talk a little bit about the wartime service.
Okay.
Where were you stationed? Where did you serve?
As soon as I finished basic training, I was shipped to Chicago, and from Chicago we took a railroad train to California to be shipped to Korea. And the worst mistake that the captain made when he saw me and another fellow, he made me the head of one of the cars because I was getting prematurely gray at 21 or 22. So he thought I'd be a responsible person. So he gave us the little room at the end of the train where you had your own little room. The rest of the guys slept, you know, on the breakdown of the chairs. He put us in charge, so we proceeded to tell the guys that we were in charge and we were going to shape up the train every day, but that the crap games would start at 9 o'clock in the morning. The beer would be gotten when we stopped at night and pulled off the railroad rails. They pulled our train off at night to a side railroad trail, so we had to get out. I had to get guys to get enough beer for the next day and enough for the crap games and the card games all the way out. But we always shaped up that car in the morning, and when the captain came in and said, "You're doing a fine job, everything looks good," and everybody's happy. For the guys that didn't want to play cards or shoot crap, we got them books and magazines and newspapers, so they were satisfied. And they said, "Farnan's doing a hell of a job."
That's funny.
So how long did it take you to get to Korea?
It took us quite a while to get across there, about 7 days, you're right, because we only traveled like at night with railroad, and they pulled us to a nights out crowding, you know, and we slept at night, and the train didn't move, so it was a troop train, all with troops on it.
Mhm.
So that from there we shipped from Chicago on that train to Pittsburgh, California. Now, who the hell would ever know where Pittsburgh? There was a camp there called Camp Stoneman. That camp was just put up temporarily for all of the guys that were coming to go to Korea.
Mhm.
And I think I was out there about a week, maybe 10 days, the most, before we boarded ship, troop ship, Merchant Marine ship. Merchant Marines hardly even exist today.
Mhm.
They're not there anymore. They used to transport all the troops. So I got on one of the general, I forget what the general ship, they were all named after ships, the mercenary ships. And it took us 14 to 16 days to get to Yokohama.
Yokohama, Japan.
Yeah. With plenty of guys getting seasick.
Did you?
No, I didn't get seasick. We also hit, now I'm trying to think, no, that was when we were going to Korea. We hit and then when we stayed in a repo depot at, in Tokyo, Camp Drake. Camp Drake was made up as a temporary repo depot in Tokyo to send us to Korea. Now from Camp Drake, when we went to Tokyo on a troop ship again, we got hit in the middle of the sea. I guess that's the Japanese Sea. The sea, I'm trying to, it's not a tsunami, but over the sea, the storm, what do they call
Typhoon?
it?
A typhoon?
Typhoon.
Typhoon.
We got hit by a typhoon. And how I remember that so vividly was when you went on a troop ship from Japan to Korea, you ate your meals at different times because you were they couldn't feed you all at once, so they had different sections. And you ate at tables like this, at this length, only up high, so you ate standing up, no sitting down, all made of steel. And the reason I say this is because you'll recognize. So we hit the typhoon in the middle of the seas at dinner time for my group, however big that galley was, where we're all standing with the steel. So every plate on the table went off
Slid off.
with the gravy and the mashed potatoes, and guys were sliding along, hitting the sides of the thing,
Oh,
splitting
no.
their heads open. When I went down in the middle of my whole meal, I looked for the leg.
To
So I
grab.
grabbed the leg, and they were coming over the top of me, and at the time it was just a mess.
How long did that last?
Oh, none of us had much to eat. You couldn't get up. The guys came out of the galley, started mopping up and cleaning up until they got it to a certain point, and then they discontinued the meals if anyone else was going to be fed after that. But I remember these guys, a lot of them were bloodied before they even got there. But you can imagine just seeing it across a steel deck with that gravy and mashed potatoes and everything going like a shot, But I remember grabbing that leg of that table, and I was fortunate, So that was a very vivid memory before I even
And
got
this
there.
is before you got to Korea.
Yeah.
So you arrive at Korea. Did
Arrived
you?
in Korea in June of 1952.
Did
I
you
think it was
see?
like the middle of June.
And where did you go in Korea? Where were you in Korea?
I wasn't aware of where the hell I was.
You know?
I know I was just up on the lines, and I didn't know where the lines were or what. I was just getting my sea legs under me to try to find out where I was, what I was doing, what I was going to be in, and so on. I only know that my first time under fire was July 4th, if that was ironic, within a couple of weeks.
So what did you do there? So when you got there, they gave you an assignment. So what did you?
Well, they gave me an assignment to a scout section.
Okay.
I was in the 3rd Reconnaissance, the 3rd Reconnaissance Group, which was a part of the 3rd Infantry Division. Now, in those days, they didn't have a lot of the elite kinds of companies that they have today. We were considered elite, the 3rd Reconnaissance. That was as elite as you got at that time. And we were one of the first to integrate. If you remember, black soldiers weren't in with World War II. So my outfits were one of the first to integrate. We had a lot of black soldiers who went in to be paratroopers. So we had a lot of paratroopers and rangers in my outfit. in the 3rd Reconnaissance. They had found out that they could not jump over in Korea, physically jump with parachutes, because half would end up on one side of a mountain and the other half would only be on the other side of the mountain. The most success that we had with paratroopers were in Europe, where it was a flat plain. And that became a very big commodity of our attack when we had the invasion of Normandy. As a matter of fact, 2 weeks before my 90th birthday, I jumped out of an airplane out in Suffolk County. I had them take it up to 12,000 feet, myself and another special forces. That was 2 weeks before my 90th, because I wanted to free fall, to see the width of the island. Yeah, so I was able to see. I was able to see the ocean on one side and the bay on the other, because they let me free fall that far, and then I was able to. The guy I had on my back let me handle the chute from way back until we landed.
I can't believe you did that.
Yeah.
That was your first time?
No, I had a little training in service,
Okay.
but it hadn't jumped in 90th birthday.
That's a great way to celebrate
Yeah.
90th birthday.
But I don't
What
let
did-
the
what did
family
you-
know.
I was just going to say,
My-
what did your family say?
My family didn't know.
Yeah,
They-
I can imagine.
No, I let them know on my 90th birthday. 2 weeks later, we had the whole family with grandchildren there, and I had the picture in the hangar with the
You're
guy that with me.
You're a cool grandpa.
so that was it. Yep.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
What kind of combat did you see?
Now, when I got into Korea and I was in the scout section, I found that I got an awareness of what the terrain was like and what was happening in Korea, and I found that I would be doing a lot of patrols because I was in the scout section, which I accepted that and I had been trained for it. My first patrol that I had I was a point man. Now, do you know what a point man is on a patrol? That's when the whole platoon goes. But the point men, there's about 6 or 7 of them go in front of the patrol. So you're out in front and you move your fellows up as you clear the ground. But before that, patrol, you have an orientation. In Korea, we had piper cubs, small piper cubs, camouflaged green and flying. Those guys were really brave. They were the ones that used to fly and take pictures of where the Chinese were moving. You could see beating paths or observe them on the ground and where they were moving. And so then they would come back with that film where there was activity, and that would get to us. And then we'd go out on patrols to take them on at night at that particular thing. So on that first patrol that I had, I was a point man. And we met with our intelligence officer back at headquarters. They called him G2. G2 stands for intelligence back at headquarters. And it was Major John Eisenhower, who was the first superior officer that I met. A very nice man. As a matter of fact, I have a letter at home that he and I corresponded with after I got out, and I have it framed. He was a major he retired as a brigadier general. So he was in charge of our intelligence, and he would meet with the point men to let us know what we might encumber on this patrol. And he let us know that we were coming into an area very close to the lines of where the Chinese were dug into solid rock on the mountains. We were in trenches, in bunkers, with sandbags on top and grass on top of that and more sandbags, whereas the Chinese dug the North Koreans and Chinese dug into solid rock with crude implements. We captured films of them, and what they did is they would take all of the women from the community, the North Korean communities, and they would bring them up on the hills, and they'd fashion a road coming up the side of the mountain, and then they'd start to dig into the rock with these crude implements to hollow out a kitchen, and they would, against the solid rock on the walls, they would make a little slabs. Like a slab they'd chisel in, and they'd have a little mat. That's where they slept. So there was solid rock over their head, and they would just drill a little hole with chisels in for the smoke from their kitchen where they cooked their rice. But they got about, we used to call it the 500 wheelbarrow brigade. They got the women from the community to come up with leather aprons, and as they chiseled and dug, they put the stones and the debris in their aprons, and they curled them up like this, and walked them over to the side of the mountain, and then emptied them instead of a wheelbarrow.
Oh, boy.
Wow.
You follow it? Can you see the picture?
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
So we captured films that showed how a lot of these were built. So when they napalmed those hills, they used to napalm the hills before we went out on a patrol at night. They'd set it on fire. The F-84s, that's the name of the plane that napalmed the hills. And the flames would be going up 30, 40, 50 feet in the air. After the flames dispersed and went down, we had binoculars, and we would look, and the Chinese would be in like diapers, fanning themselves, but they were dug into solid rock, so it didn't bother them unless they caught them outside. So that's how we took over some of their hills, and that's how we know they were dug into some.
So they dug into the hills because of the napalm.
Sure, and for protection, natural protection.
Natural protection.
And then in front of their hills, facing our, as I told you before, facing our trenches, they dug caves where they had their cannons and everything. And they had only rudimentary implements like us. Their weapons were worse than ours. But you got to remember that China and Russia gave them the burp guns. Russia gave them a lot of weapons during that time. And they're called the burp gun. It was like you're reading about the old gangsters, the Tommy guns. It had a band box on it, and it was loaded with cartridges. And you could hear if you could put a string of bullets to it, it could do 900 bullets in a minute. And it was called a burp gun. It would go like this, rip, rip. That's why they named it a burp gun.
So you said you were the front man with this. So that meant you went out first to check out the territory. Did you ever get hurt or anything when you did this, or?
What you mean when we went out? No, this was a patrol that we would go out
and
to.
you said you were the front person.
Yeah, we
So-
were the what you call the advanced group.
Yeah,
You
so
know.
did you ever like get in trouble? That were, you stepped into something?
Oh no, we ended up that particular night. We were told by Major Eisenhower that we would be encountering a burned out village that was burned out years back, and then there was a lot of traffic going in and out, and they were frequent in that area as an area. So when we almost came upon it, we heard them talking at night. So we ended up in a firefight with them.
Oh, God.
We ended up with a firefight with them, and as we ended up with a firefight with them, we heard some of them scream, of course, so some of them got hit. And as we ended up firefighting with, don't forget our major group was behind us, so we kept falling back. And then the Chinese didn't know if they were getting attacked because there was somebody down on the ground and that burned out, so they started rolling out their cannons and throwing in their cannon fodder at us, and we were pinned down. So we were in radio with Major Eisenhower back at the headquarters, and we were going through all of this. This was my first patrol.
A month after you
Yeah.
arrived.
Right.
So was there a language barrier? Like if the Chinese were talking, did you know what anybody was saying besides your
No, we do because we only knew that the lieutenant was talking with Major Eisenhower back at headquarters, and he was trying to assess how many of them that we encountered at that village. We didn't know. We said probably a handful, about a dozen. We speculated, and we told them that we were in a firefight with the group, our group that was up in front, and we indicated that we didn't know how much further, because they wanted us to continue to go further to the Chinese line. But now we had already encountered, people out to go any further to try to make contact. They really they didn't think if we got through that burned out village, they wanted us to go up to the lines it was foolishness. They wanted us then to try to estimate how many were in that location, dug in the rock. It's impossible but these are the kinds of missions that we were on.
And you said they were all at night.
Pardon?
You said they were all at night time.
That was a nighttime, so sure. The one thing we did every day, all of us, was to pray for no moon. The last thing we wanted out on a night on a patrol was a moon. Because up in those high grounds and the mountains, and if you've ever been in an area, the moon never shines any brighter than if you go up to the Catskills or the Adirondacks, then even down here, there's so many things that diffuse it down here. Up there, that moon would silhouette you like it was no tomorrow. So you would pray for no moon. That was the biggest thing you would pray for. All of our patrols went out at dusk. We always went out at dusk. And we had three types of patrols. We had an ambush patrol. We had a combat patrol. That's when you had to make contact. And we had a reconnaissance patrol, just to pick up information. So those were the three basic patrols. Whenever we went out on a patrol, we would meet remember, it was a trench, and in our trenches and in front of our lines were all minefields with barbed wire. So it was loaded with, if you can visualize, barbed wire all the way up to those, because you didn't want somebody just to run through an open ground to get into your trench. They would have to go through barbed wire and through a minefield before they got to you, which the Chinese used to do. They used to take the men that they didn't have weapons and they put them out front to throw themselves on the barbed wire, and then they'd step on them and run over them. That's the way they invaded a line. But anyhow, we had to go out at different cuts in the main line of resistance. That's what they called the trench, the MLR, main line of resistance. That's how it was characterized. We had to learn the safe lane to go down. Sometimes we walked it during the day, because sometimes that safe lane went down like this, back like this, back like that, through the minefield. So you wouldn't get blown up to go down into no man's land to go out. And that's the way you had to come back in. You couldn't come back in. You could only come back in through those safe lanes. They called it a safe lane. You didn't want to get off that in the minefield. It was only about 3 feet wide.
3 feet wide.
Yeah, to go down through that.
Well,
and we always got a blessing. We always got a blessing before we went out. Very interesting. There's always comedy in everything. And very interesting, the one night that I went out to Outpost Kelly on an ambush patrol. That's in the book, if you read the book.
Yes.
In Outpost Kelly, we had a rabbi come and give us a ecumenical prayer. Little did we know how much that ecumenical prayer would be, for us. But anyhow, he said to us, you probably have never seen a rabbi. No, it was the first time I saw a rabbi there, and it generally was a minister or a priest, and they would be the chaplains that would come and do the prayer for us. And we went down the safe lane, and we got out, and there was a kid in front of me from Georgia by the name of Dwayne. You don't mind if I use an expletive, do you?
No.
He turned around and said to me, and remember this, in 1952, Ben, what the fuck is a rabbi? 1952, from Georgia. He didn't know what a rabbi was. But we didn't, from New York, when I used to go to Florida, we used to get stopped in North Carolina and Georgia and fined they didn't accept us in that time in the 1949 and 1950 time going to Florida. So that was a big part of of how they set up our patrols. So the patrol that I went on to Outpost Kelly, I volunteered for that patrol because we had a Native American that we called Chief, and he was to rotate in 2 weeks, and he had a feeling not a good feeling on this patrol.
He was going to go back home.
He was going to go back home, so I took his patrol, which they say
Very
in the
commendable.
Army or in any service, don't ever volunteer. And that's what cost me that time out there in Outpost Kelly. Was an ambush patrol, and we got ambushed.
So what happened to you?
Well, the man that was in charge of that patrol panicked and left us. So I took over the patrol. That's in the book. And I took over the patrol, and I took them all to a culvert, a water culvert. The water was up to our waist. I took the rest of the guys. We had 2 rocks with us, too. You know what a rock is? ROK,
Okay.
Republic of Korea, soldier.
South Korean soldier.
Well, South Korea. When the guy in charge of the patrol panicked, because when we got ambushed, the attack started on the hill. We were at the base of the hill, and the attack started on the hill. And when the attack started on the hill, we got ambushed. When we got ambushed, they normally send in all the artillery right over your head from our people to bombard the side of the hill, so there were explosives all around us.
Oh God.
So I had to get away from that. I took over the patrol. Now that was the most frightened I was in my life. I was always frightened, but now I had 10 guys under my leadership. That's frightening. That's really frightening. So I took them into a water culvert, and I put 4 on one bank and 4 or 5 on the other bank in case we got attacked. They came in on us. We were only there a short period of time when they threw in a grenade on us.
Oh my goodness.
A Russian grenade. They call it a hand masher. Your mother's ever have a potato masher that used to? And their grenades were made like that. They had a handle on them, and they threw it in. Can you imagine? It hit in the middle of us. It hit in the middle of us, and the water swallowed the explosive shrapnel. But it gave, the only thing I remember, I had one thing, one guy was frightened to death on the bank, and I was guaranteeing him that I was going to get him back safely. And I had my helmet off. My helmet had burlap on it, and mud on it, and some branches of trees on it. And I had it off because I was sweating. I was sweating now that I really was in trouble with all these guys. I had to convince them. Trying to guarantee him. He was saying, Ben, we're not going to make it. I said, I guarantee we're going to make it. I guarantee you. And with that grenade came in, got swallowed, and the only thing I remember, I got blown back on the bank. I remember every color of the kaleidoscope coming up from that thing. I could see every color, just momentarily, secondarily. And the only guy that got shrapnel was the guy that I was trying to calm. He got it in his lip, but a piece had hit my helmet. Fortunately, I had my helmet off, dented my helmet, or ripped my face.
Oh my God.
Wow.
So
So
I
you
had to,
didn't-
I
you
had to
didn't-
get
you
those guys out of there then,
Right.
because they knew there. So I was able to move them up the gully to where it kind of expands, and then reeds. You know, reeds they grow. Then
Yeah.
once they're, and I was able to get them in the reeds.
So nobody
we
got
took
hurt
cover.
except the one guy?
He was the only guy that got shrapnel. I was able to pull it out. I calmed him down. He was screaming with the shrapnel. But what are you gonna do? It's. So I was able to get them back the next morning.
Oh my
Was
goodness.
safe for all of them. Life. What are you gonna do? That was the biggest thing that happened. And if you can, as I said, I was written for the Bronze Star with Valor for bringing them back. I signed for it, and then that was September 1952, September 18th. I'll never forget the date. And then we moved from that area to the Cherawan area. The Cherawan area in the middle of, beyond the 38th parallel. My fighting was always done in, beyond the 38th parallel, in no man's land. And we were up there on October 28th at Iron Horse Mountain. They later named it Jackson Heights, because the fellow up there, the lieutenant, got a Silver Star for his battles that he had on that hill. And we were, at that point, we moved up there to retake that hill the next morning. But fighting was still going on the hill. So the captain called down to my bunker to tell me to be on the lookout for anybody that got ran off the hill or might be wounded in front of us, in the minefield or anywhere. And so he alerted everybody along the way. We were to retake that hill and to take it over from a Puerto Rican regiment, the 65th Regiment. They refused to go back out.
You were talking about the Puerto Rican.
The Puerto Rican regiment, there was a number of them. I think it was a big write-up. You can Google it any time in the New York Times. 98 of them refused to go out. So my platoon, the 3rd platoon, they put a few guys, they arrested them right there because they disobeyed an order. And it was written up in the New York Times. They were called the disgrace of the 98. Of the 65th Regiment, which was a Puerto Rican regiment. Puerto Rican sent, that was, you remember that was a United Nations war. So we had representatives from every country. So they refused to go back out, and some of our men had to put them under arrest. They had them in a circle, took their weapons away. So my group was to jump off and retake that hill. But at about 4 o'clock in the morning, I heard some moaning in front of my bunker. And the moaning was getting louder and louder and going on and on. In somebody in terrific pain. So I got on the radio and I called the captain. Now he was a captain. Our lieutenant now became a captain. So I called him and I said, I've got some moaning in front of my position. You told us to be on the lookout. It's obviously a human being. It's got to be one of our guys. He must be in the minefield. I don't know what happened to him. I can't see. It happened to be a pretty warm day that day in October for Korea, so that when the night came, it got colder and it was just all fog, like being in London town. I said, I can't see a doggone thing. I said, and the only thing I have to mark it, if I try to get to this guy, is a little sapling tree behind me, because most of the big trees were blown down, cracked from a recent previous attacks and so on. So I said, I can mark it by this little sapling once we get out in front, but we have to get out there when it's visible in the morning. So we had to wait until the sun rose, and it still wasn't bright because the fog hadn't burned off with the sun. And now I would say that would be sometime maybe around 6 or 6:30. So that moaning was still coming from that minefield. So myself and the captain and my buddy, can you imagine? I'll never believe it. The medic refused to go out. There was fighting still going on. Don't ask me why. I don't know. You know, the crazy things. He wouldn't go out. So the 3 or 4 of us went out through the safe lane. Fighting still going on the hill, small arm fire. We went out and I walked down by the wire and I spotted the little tree that was behind me, which I used as a marker. And there in the minefield, with a crevice blown out, was one of our soldiers lying with heat. The heat coming up from he detonated a mine. Obviously trying to get back to our lines. He must have been wounded. And his leg was partially just hanging off.
Wow.
But he was going into shock. Now, how do you get to somebody like that? Because that's a minefield.
Yeah.
So we're all standing there. We're powerless because the people that put the mines in were our engineers. So to have, and a lot of the Koreans were blowing up after we left there when they used to cultivate the fields with the oxen for the, for the rice paddies, because a lot of the mines weren't taken in. So you would never get to where they were. However, I'm colorblind. So with colorblind being with your greens and your grays, when you put up camouflage, I can see camouflage right off the bat because I'm colorblind. I'm the reverse.
Okay.
So I'm standing there, and as the fog raised, if you can believe it, this is almost an unbelievable story.
Right,
This is almost the fog raised. I could see the little fish lines in the grass. They were like green, attached to the mines.
Yeah.
Attached from one mine here, a line going, and if you trip that line, you blow up both of those mines. They put them at that level so that when you get in, you triple with your feet. Well, I could see them, and what made them more noticeable to me as the fog rose, droplets of dew was on the wire, like birds on a wire.
Yeah.
So I could trace that. But I didn't know where the mines that were buried are. See, they have buried mines. The ones that are above ground is a tripwire.
Right.
The ones that are buried, they're buried beneath the soil about that deep, about 3 or 4 inches deep. Just maybe 2 or 3 inches of soil on the top of them. And they work 2 ways. They work with pressure. When you step on them, they blow your legs off.
Oh, great.
And then you have the pressure release. You put pressure on them, you walk away from them, and they come out of the ground with a propeller and blow your head off. So I didn't know where those were, but I knew this guy was going to die. So I said to the captain, I said, let me go in and see if I can get to him. And I'll make footprints. Big, because now the soil was soft because of being unusually warm for that October and for the fog out. So I went in and I made pronounced footprints all the way up to this guy.
How far was he away from you?
I would say he was from here to the lady at the desk.
Wow.
That's quite a
Yeah.
ways
So did
to
you
go.
save his life?
Pardon?
Did you save his life?
So when I walked in, I got to him. I didn't have the stretcher. Somebody I said, if I get to him, you got to come in my footprints with the stretcher, and we'll put him on that so we don't disturb. And if we're lucky to get, if I'm lucky to get that far, at least I know that's a safe area for them to come in. So I got to him, And I guess during that particular night, he must have had his 45 out. We all carried 45s besides carbine. And I guess when he detonated his 40 with the mine, his 45 must have flown. So that flew from about here to one of your chests over here that you got right behind you, and I could see it laying on the ground. And he wanted me to go and get that. I said, "Are you crazy?" I said, "You lucky I got the." Can you imagine that? These guys thinking they're going to be. I said, "Forget that. That's there for posterity." So we loaded them on we loaded them on the stretcher. We walked out in my footprints. We got him out of the minefield. We took him over to the river and we called in MASH. And his leg, we were able to tie his leg in with a tourniquet, with a belt. One of the guys said that should put a belt on him, tie that leg in. And they put him on. I don't know whether you guys knew that when they flew back to MASH, they flew helicopters with canisters on the outside. On the outside, they had loaded like a casket. Like a casket. You opened it up, you put them in it, and then they on both sides of the and they fly him back to MASH. So we put him in one of those.
Wow.
I don't know whether he lived or died because we moved out of that area, after that. But we got him to that point.
Well, you risked your life to do that.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
And that was the one that I was recommended for the Silver Star. Now, see, the big thing that happened to me, all of you have to know, when I came back from Korea, I came back in 1953. I started college at 24.
Yeah, you were older.
I started college. So now, when I started college, I went straight through and graduated in 3 years, and then I started for my master's. So I got my master's and my undergraduate degree in basically 4 years almost.
What do you have a master's in?
Administration and economics.
And
My master's is in administration. I was in the school superintendent's office. What happened, I never looked into my records until 30 years later. Angelo Capobianco got involved with me.
Yeah.
And he said, "People got to know your story, Ben. They have to know it. You said nothing for 30 years. I said I had a lot of things I had to do, raise children, go to college, involved in my work, coaching football, coaching baseball, and being in the classroom. And I said, I didn't have time for it. I said, but you're right, I better look into my records. When I looked into my records in 1982, that was approximately 30 years later, I found out my records were destroyed. They were in that fire. 1971, there was a fire in St. Louis, which I never knew, in the archives, and they destroyed all my records. So really, I have no records of all these things, except the people that I found. That, what happened was Angelo Cap got me with Congressman Peter King, and he said, if you get 2 people, Ben, that verify, I got 2 people, and one of them is only alive now. The other one died just recently. But then the committee that I was before, they wanted me to get in touch with an officer. And we only had, most of my outfit was run by non-commissioned officers. I only had one officer that I was close to and knew all my things. And his name was John Davis, Captain John Davis. And that works for Caucasians, and it's just as an active name as in for black individuals. So I never could find him.
Oh, you never tracked him down.
30 years I've been looking for him.
Wow.
I even hired a special, he gave me his address when he left, and I knew he was from Texas, but I lost it. And I hired an investigator, a former Green Beret. I hired him for 2 months to try to find him in Texas. I never found him. But with that unusual name,
John
very
Davis?
common.
He's very common, yeah.
Yeah, the unusual, very common name.
Right.
Unusual to try to find.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
So
It's like Smith and Jones. It was impossible. I didn't have a middle initial. Everything I tried to find, even with morning reports out of the archives, the morning report, he was never mentioned in them, so I never got a serial number, and so I never found him.
But you know he
So
was
therefore,
a
I
captain.
never acquired with my records one. So that was my whole story.
it seems like you
Crazy story. It always seems I'm in a lot of crazy things, to tell you the truth.
But it seems like you did like a lot of good things for people. That was really commendable.
Well, I came back to this, to Glen Cove. I was a former police commissioner here, as you well know. You met the fellow that one day.
So when you were serving over there, and what did you do in your free time? Did you know?
When free time, they would bring you back. They would bring you back to get showers.
Uh-huh.
Because most of the time you were up on the lines for 15 days or more, and you never had a shower. And you used to pick up, we picked up a lot of lice, a lot of lice. So, we'd come back, we were just happy to get back and to be wherever we were, to have a pickup softball game, or to have a case of beer, or have a good, meal, because when you were up in the lines, you only maybe got one meal a day that was even cooked, and sometimes you didn't get that. What happened is we bred the rats. The rats used to come into our bunker. We would sometimes kill them before we went to try to get some sleep, because they would burrow through the grass and the sandbags. They'd chew through them to come in where the heat was in a bunker. We had those little kerosene stoves, and if it was 110, if it was 40 degrees out or 30 degrees out, they were looking to get to a warm place. And to a place, we kept all of our extra cheese and crackers in munition metal containers so they couldn't get to them. But you were so tired, I used to get into my sleeping bag and just turn my head away from the opening. You could feel them crawling.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, but you were so tired, you'd really want to get to sleep. Some days hadn't had sleep in 2 or 3 days,
Terrible.
We'd come off a patrol at night, or a listening post at night, and, a listening post outside in the frozen fields, the rice paddies. You could only stay 2 hours in there. You'd be frozen to death. We would, each person would take a 2-hour shift in front of our lines. So you were so tired, because we used to pull or pull cards in the deck to see who would sleep on the upper bunk, because the upper bunk is where they crawl.
Oh, how many people? Like, is it two to a bunk?
There's generally 2 in a bunker.
2 to a bunk.
If you got the lower, and dirt floors.
Ugh.
So we used to put cheese and stuff down. We could shoot them, some of them, when they would be nibbling on the cheese. And,
Oh my
you
goodness.
could throw them out.
So you talked about the guy that you didn't find out what happened to him, that you've been looking for him. Have you kept in touch with anybody else in that you any?
No, because what happened was, as I referred to you, when I came back, it was 30 years before I even looked at my records.
Okay.
30 years. And then I got in touch with a guy after 30 years in the 80s, 90s, that knew me by heart. I got in touch with him in Minnesota. He didn't recognize my name from my outfit.
Oh.
But I was able to get 2 guys. The guy that was alongside of me, he and I became very close friends. He's still alive. He moved to Alaska after he came home. He couldn't handle a lot of things, so he moved to Alaska, a new frontier for him. And we've been very close. He's the only one that's alive now to verify. But nobody could make up a story like I told you guys. You can't make that up. But I think that the committee might have thought it was unbelievable. Who the hell would do this?
Seemed
Who
outrageous,
would know
right? Who would,
volunteer
right.
first, going with all these things. I did some crazy things in my day, but
How were you able to stay in touch and communicate with your family and friends back home?
We had an AP by mail, but I never told them what I was in the middle of. I made it like I was just in a great place, you know, back behind the line. You see, you could, when I was in Korea, I could have been home in 9 months. I had to spend over a year there because they had no replacement for me. If you were on the lines, you got 3 points for being on the lines. And you got 2 points for being behind the lines. And you got 1 point to be, no, I'm sorry. You got 4 points for being on the lines. Even I'm forgetting. 3 points for being behind in the artillery on the lines. 2 points for being in headquarters. 1 point for being way back in Busan or something. So it would take you had to have 36 points to rotate.
Okay.
In 9 months, I was on the lines every month. I had 36 points.
Right.
But I had no replacement. So I didn't go home until after like 13 months.
So you mentioned you had a wife. Were you married at the time you were in
Oh,
Korea?
no. Thank God. Thank God. No. That's why we didn't tell on the guy that panicked, that left us,
Yeah.
because he was married with 2 children.
Oh, no.
I might have done
Oh.
the same thing.
Oh, he never got in trouble. You never told.
No, and he got killed.
Oh.
Yeah, so we didn't, you know, so we didn't want to tell him. You know, you didn't want it to get worse, but they suspected it.
How did your wartime experience change you?
My what?
How did your wartime experience change you?
You know, that's interesting you mention that. For a lot of guys, it soured them. They came back. A lot of them became alcoholics, became on drugs. I have a great displacement factor. I put that behind me as another experience. I just said, that's like playing football, that's like going to Florida, that's like going to the Mardi Gras, like going to Cuba. That's a part of my life that I just put it behind me. I didn't let it linger on me. And the proof of that is I got started. Not many guys in Korea took advantage of that were in
GI Bill?
combat of college, because they couldn't acclimate. You couldn't study. They couldn't discipline themselves. So I got right into college. So I got into college, and I didn't get married until my senior year in college. So then of course you have children and everything. You got all different. I just chalk those up to passages. That was a good question, but I have a great way of just displacing it. I've been lucky with that. I've been fortunate.
Did you
Say that.
return to Glen Cove after the war?
Oh
You
yeah,
came back
my
here?
family was here. Sure. I came back to Glen Cove. I started. I played one more year of football, semi-pro football. I started college. I went to my brother John passed me on the ocean. When I was coming home, he was going to Korea.
Oh.
But fortunately, he only had a short time to stay, because that was 1953, that I was coming home in April or near May. He only had to stay till July, because
End of
the
the
war
war.
was over.
Yeah.
So fortunate for him. But we both ended up having partial football scholarships. He went up to Alfred when he came home. I waited one more year. I started in '54. I gave myself a breather to go back down to the Mardi Gras, to Florida, to Cuba, and I started in '54.
Where did you go?
I went to Adelphi,
Oh.
because we flipped a coin. One of us had to stay home. I got to stay home. He went up to Alfred, play football up at Alfred. Alfred's up by Rochester.
Yeah, I know where it is.
Yeah. Good school, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
So my brother John, he and I started school at the same time.
Mhm.
He was a year and a half younger than me. You know, the Irish, they my mother and father got married. My mother was 32 or 33, and my father was 38 or 39. And they had 5 children.
Oh, boy.
So you got to go kind of quickly.
Yes.
Stair-step children, you know. So,
Did you continue any friendships?
pardon?
Did you continue any friendships
From the military?
from the military?
Well, but all my friendships were, you know, from, I did, when I originally went in, the guys that I originally went in from basic training,
Mhm.
they lived in Brooklyn. But then you lose sight of them because you're going to school and college. Neither one of those guys went to college or anything, you know. So you take another path in life, you know. It's so vastly different. You know, I caused, you know, not looking into my records, I caused my own problem by doing all of that and having my plate so full that I didn't even look into my records until 30 years after, and at the behest of Angelo Capobianco. So who knows that? So that's why I'm in that dilemma that I'm in, you know, right now. I'm going to try. I have Tom Swazi, who's a good friend now. And I'm going to call him and ask him if there's been any adjustments to the requirements. As a matter of fact, I figured I met with you guys. And he's a personal friend of the family. He grew up with my son Grady, and they're very good friends. So I was going to call him and have him give me 20 minutes to a half hour to see if there's any chance, if after all these years, that they would take another look at it and they could have the right to call my buddy who's now 93. God knows, hope he lasts a long time just for the life he loves to have, going from Arizona to Alaska every year, back and forth. Loves to fish and hunt. So, well, that's, you know.
I know you're very involved with the VFW post in
I'm,
Glen Cove.
yeah, I'm a former commander, and we're having a lot of things now that are going to be fundraisers. As a matter of fact, Tom Swazi is going came to meet with us 4 or 5 days ago, and he's going to raise $100,000 for us. And we're having one coming up now on February 19th.
At the Polish Hall?
At the View.
Oh, okay.
At the, where did you say, what did you just say?
The Polish Hall is
Oh, that's
in March.
the Polish Hall. in March.
Right, in March.
How did you find out about that?
I was on a meeting today and I heard it.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Were you with Tom Swazi?
No, I was representing the library.
Ah.
Yeah.
Yep, his is going to be 1 month from the one that we're having at the View next week. That's the 19th. His is going to be the 19th at the Polish Hall. You're right. And he said he hopes to raise $100,000. So
Is
I'm
it?
very active with the post. Yes.
Did you
yeah.
join it right away?
No, I did
veteran-
not join it right away.
When did you join veterans organizations?
I'm trying to remember when I joined that. I guess I must be there about 20 years. I guess, you know, as my responsibilities lessened and I was able to, you know, put more time in, because I've been, remember, I was a board of directors on the Y since 1982. So I was devoting a lot of time to the Y to build that up. And I didn't think I could go to the VFW and devote that kind of time. Because when I started with the Y, we just had the one building. We built the preschool, we built the corporate headquarters, we built a whole thing out in the field for the kids for their art lessons, and a roller rink, and when we put the pool in down.
Yeah.
So, and I was the chairman of the buildings and grounds, because I had a background in construction. So I devoted a lot of my time to the Y since 1982. You know, a long time.
Both of my kids went to preschool and summer camps there.
Oh, so you're a friend of Liberty's.
Yes.
Liberty's,
Ledesma. Liberty
right.
Ledesma, yes.
Yeah, very lovely
Lovely.
woman.
Yeah.
did a wonderful job with my grandchildren down there. And that's a beautiful place that we put up and gave them wonderful experience. And then we had difficulty getting the schools to cooperate with us. The superintendents were frightened of having. So I got Judge McCord and myself, and we went up and saw they were turning us down all the time for after school.
Oh.
For after school. I was the guy with Judge McCord that got that in. I went up to, we had a man up there as a superintendent a number of years back. Everybody was turned down. They were frightened to do it with the buses. I said, we can do it with the buses because I did it in New Rochelle. That's where I was in the superintendent's office. We got the kids to go to Hebrew school. We got kids to go to dance school. We got the kids to go to athletic programs. I got kids to go to the Y. So I said, I know you can do it. So I got the judge together with I, and we went up to him and said, look, if you can do this will, your stock will go up. Just try it on a per diem basis at one school. We tried it at DC for the after-school program.
Right.
Because it was the closest to the Y. I said, once they find out how easy it is, your stock will go up. I'm going to tell you, there'll be people clamoring.
I think that
And
might
so-
have been Delgado.
It could have been.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he was convinced, because I was a former educator, and I said, I did it at New Rochelle. And that's a bigger city and in Glen Cove. And we had them going every which way after school. As long as we had the permission from the parents, we could just change the bus that was picking them up at school, make one more drop, because I checked with the bus company with Hendrickson, they said, no problem. We started at DC, we got swamped the next year. So now they do it with every school. So not only the working parents, we were able to take care of not only having your youngster going into preschool,
Right.
but now I had my youngsters going into preschool, but they also came back to my grandchildren after school.
After school.
Because
Yeah.
the parents were working. So the program was worked out wonderful.
Well,
So
I'm
that
so
was
happy.
due to myself, McCord and myself, that convinced them.
It's a great place, that Y.
Yeah.
Pardon?
I love the Y. It's a good place.
Oh, it's a wonderful place.
Yeah.
It's a great place. They took a hit during that pandemic.
Yeah.
I really wanted them to fight that lockup, and because I've always felt that when you have a pandemic or you have anything that's encroaching on your health, the things that should be open should be the gyms and the Ys and the physiotherapy to help out. Well, it's proven today that we set aside a lot of people that were going in for cancer operations, heart operations that died. You know, we lost out with that lockdown. I wanted them
Well,
to
I
fight
tell you,
that.
I swim, and they were one of the last institutions to close. They kept it, that Y kept that pool open as long as they could. They were one of the last institutions to close when COVID started.
I know.
They really kept going and going, and
I
then
know.
So-
I know. I even kept the bar going down at the vets. You know what happened? I don't know whether you know the story. Because these veterans had no place to go, and they were supposed to close down. Came down, and then, so the guys said to me, I was the commander then. So they said to me, Ben, you got the edict from the national and from the governor that you have to close down the bar. I said, yeah, I know, I got the message. So you're going to close down the bar? I said, no. And they said, you're not going to close, we're going to get in trouble. I said, oh, okay, I'll take the rap. I'll take the rap. But you're going to go out there and tell those guys at the bar that's the only place they got to come to during the day, play cards, play checkers, have a few beers, talk with their guy. You go out and tell them. I'm not telling them. I'm keeping it open. So they all said to me, okay. I said, I'll take the rap. If it's $1,000 thing, I'll pay the fine. I'll take the rap. So I didn't close it. And the guys went along with me on it. I don't know whether Howie told you this story or not.
No,
but,
he didn't disclose that.
They don't divulge it. But anyhow, the guys really appreciated it, and we treated it right. We spread them at the bar, the chairs, and kept the distance. and they really, but then the marshals came. They knocked on the door, we saw them come, but they apologized to us. And they said, we're only doing our job, Ben. They said, look, you've had the grace period, you're able to keep it up. You leave the guys here today, what time you close? And they said, we close 8 or 9 o'clock. They close up and close it down, do me a favor. So, closed it down. But the guys appreciated the effort. We got an extra, I don't know, maybe an extra month out of it, I don't know. But it was great for them, so.
So,
As I
so-
said,
so
I've
did
done some crazy illegal things that you can see.
So did the military impact your feelings about war and about war in this
Pardon?
country? Did the service that you did it impact your feelings about war in this country? Do you feel?
Do I feel what?
How do you feel about the military in this country now? What do you feel about the war in this country? Did it?
Well, I hope that we don't go to war on this Russian thing, if that's what you're talking about with the Ukraine. I hope that they don't do it. And I think that Putin is just doing bravado. I know that he won't invade now, while his good friend is having the Olympics over there in China. I don't know what he'll do after that. Who knows? But I hope it doesn't happen. You know, war is never a good thing, especially combat. You know, there's one thing to be in the military and not. Military can be a wonderful experience. You're in Germany or somewhere else. Combat is a hell of a lot different. You know,
That's what we hear.
you know, look at that 10-year war with Vietnam. You know, I'm the only really, I think there's one other active guy. I'm going on 92 now. So I'm the only other active member of the VFW from, and Vinnie Martinez. is the
And
other.
also Ken Moore. I'm not sure if he's active with the post, but Ken.
Yeah, I guess
also.
Ken is too. But
Yeah.
was Ken with the Korean War?
Korean War.
Well, I don't.
Yeah.
What year was he in?
That I'm not sure.
He probably was
What-
in the Navy. You know, the Navy guys. You know, they weren't in combat. So I'm the only guy that was in combat from the Korean War. That's in VFW. Yeah, I know Ken Moore is right. But you know, I don't know how old is Ken.
I'm not. I think he might be a year older than you. I'm not.
Oh no, he's
positive.
not a hero.
He's
That I
not.
know. He's
No.
younger than me.
Ooh.
Yeah. No, Ken is not older than me. That I know.
We will be doing his interview
Okay.
probably in April.
I wonder if Ken is okay.
So, what would you like to tell the future generation when they listen to this interview?
Oh, gee. They listen to this, they're going to get a few laughs. That's for one good thing. You know, you might take this the wrong way. I'm absolutely, I'm thrilled that I saw combat, and I'm safe. You know, I'm back without having any ultimate injury, because that is an experience. Because I had a person say to me one time, and I dwelt upon that, and I know this person to be a tough, resilient individual. And he said to me, you know, Ben, I often thought, I've never been in the military, I often thought, how would I function if I was in combat? How would I function? And it's an interesting thing. You really don't think about it, because number one, you're very young at that time. And thank goodness I wasn't married, as you had mentioned. I was married, so I had no big responsibilities. And your responsibilities at that time is your fellow buddy, the guys that are with you. They have your back, you have their back. You go on with your life after you leave them, but at that time, they're your family. And they're the ones that you're looking out for and hoping that you can do something to contribute to their welfare. And so I felt that even though I don't go around and talk like I'm a combat guy and some of these guys go on and, you know, take combat too far. I didn't even do anything with it for 30 years, you know, to even look into it. So, but in my own being, I'm kind of glad that I was exposed to it, because it's an experience that you'll never ever forget. And if you come out alive, it's a wonderful experience. I think it hardens you. My wife used to always say to me, Ben, you never worry. Why don't you worry sometime about the kids or something else? I said, why would I worry? I was given up for dead. Why should I worry? I was already given up for dead. They didn't think that patrol was coming back. So I had already been given up for dead. So now I'm going to start to worry? No.
You're very lucky, though. You have a great disposition in life. You're lucky. You know, not
Yeah, I'm very
everybody,
fortunate.
not everybody's so blessed with that they can just move forward like that. It's a great way to be.
Absolutely. And I'll be the first one to say it.
Mhm.
I'm very fortunate. I'm very lucky. You're absolutely right to go through all of the things that I went through unscathed. Unscathed. If you can imagine, I had to sign, how stupid am I? I had to sign myself out to go to MASH. Now, why did I have to go to MASH? You said that when you come back, what did you do when you came back from the MLR?
Mm-hmm.
Some guys would gamble. Some guys would drink. Some would play little softball games or football, touch tackle. Some would box. There was one guy in our outfit that nobody liked. He was in the kitchen. He was a big black guy. And the black guys that were with my outfit didn't like him either. I didn't like him. Every time he'd come up with the food, if we got some hot food, he almost we just disliked him. So when we came back one time from, they all said to me, I did a little boxing before I went over, and they all said, Ben, put the gloves on with this guy. Box him, we don't like him. I said, I'm not putting the box on with this guy. This guy's bigger than me. So when you come back, you drink beer and you drink whiskey. Well, when you drink whiskey and I drink whiskey, it's the wrong thing to drink. So I said, where's that big guy from the Williams put the gloves on him and me. So we started boxing, and we went 3 1-minute rounds. 1 minute of big rounds with, you know, combat boots and everything on. And in the third round, we were boxing pretty good, hitting one another pretty good. In the third round, he hit me good. And so I went down, and we were boxing it was cold weather. And we were where the Jeeps had gone over there, and the ruts in the road, the mud had frozen. So he hit me good, and I went down only to my knee, but I hit my whole knee on it. And I bounced right back up, and we finished the fight. But my knee went up about that big at night, and I was drinking whiskey and everything, trying to keep the pain down, but I couldn't even walk on it. So they had to send me in the middle of the night at 3 o'clock in the morning. I had to go back to MASH. Now, to go back to MASH and to be embarrassed to go in there that I was boxing, I didn't know what to say. I couldn't tell him that. I had to tell him that I had to dive in because a round was coming in. I was just so embarrassed. But I was letting guys that were getting shot up and everything that were coming, I was letting them all go before me.
Wow.
I was saying, just put cold pads on everything. You know, boy, was I embarrassed. So I got a feeling of MASH being back. It was a good thing. I was in a big tents with the tents around, and they had movies, and they had ice cream, and they had soda and good meals. And I was there. I signed myself out to join my outfit. My leg still wasn't up to par, but at least it went down. I ripped the ligament in it, you know. So and that's when I was back about 1 week when I had Outpost Kelly, when I took that thing. So crazy stuff. But anyhow, that's how embarrassed I was, and I got to MASH. So anybody that sees this and rolls this, they're going to keep saying that guy's crazy.
Well, I think they're going to have some good laughs when they view this interview, and they're going to walk away.
What is it now? Does that become like a whole film? Or like
Yes.
A
It's-
canister film, yeah.
Oh, not canister. This is it gets sent to them on a little thumb drive.
Oh,
It's gonna be an MP4,
wow.
and then they will hold it. And I don't know how
Terrific.
long they'll take to process, but they'll
Yeah.
put it on their website.
So do you
as well.
share these stories with your children and grandchildren?
Pardon?
Do you share your stories with your children and grandchildren?
I only did later on in life because I felt after Angelo got me involved, I said, you know, it would be a good thing for my grandchildren to have those medals or have that, you know, that acclamation. So I did, and I got my son. I'm not computer. I'm not into technology, and I'm not computer savvy. So I had to have my son, you know, do a lot of the work because a lot of the things that get that you have to get or look, you have to go into the internet and look it up, and I'm just not good at that.
Well, we'll
So-
give you a copy of this. I just want to thank you so much for coming in. And
I think you're going to find mine is one of your more interesting.
oh,
You know, I wanted to tell you a story. I got on a plane. It was a fascinating thing. I got on a plane to go out to my brother's 80th birthday in California, and I had my Korean hat on. Yeah, the Korean hat. And what happened on the plane, there was a guy on the plane with his little daughter, and he wasn't sitting next to me. He asked the fellow that was sitting next to me if he could trade seats. He saw the hat,
Yeah.
and he went over and he interviewed me. He was a reporter
oh, wow.
for the Times. What do they call that Times? It's in the city. It's got a funny name. But anyhow, I don't know why I can't think of that name. But he interviewed me, which was great. But I was hoarse when I got out to San Diego. But he got the whole story, and then he said he'd let me know when he was going to print the story, and I never heard from him again. And if he lost my information, I don't know. But somebody Googled my name from the company I was working with. I had been working in the city with Siami Construction. I just retired at 89. I was working.
Wow, congratulations.
Yeah. So I working with him for years in the construction, one of the top construction companies in the city. They Googled my name. They saw the whole write-up from
Ah,
the
did you ever get a
Yahoo
copy of
Times.
it?
Yeah, and then
Good.
the girl, the assistant there,
Good.
she made it. She said, Ben, why didn't you tell us about this story? I said, what are you talking about? I didn't even know anything about it. So when they Googled my name, the whole story came up. So a lot of people since then have Googled, but I never saw I never heard from him. So just an interesting aside. But anyhow, thank both of you. I appreciate
You're
it.
right,
You,
Thank
you
you so
handled
much.
it very nicely, and I felt very comfortable talking and going through it. And so,
And you're right, I'm sure your children will get a lot of laughs out of watching this.
pardon?
I said, I'm sure your children will get a lot of laughs out of watching
Oh
the
my
interview.
God. Yeah. So now, how do you play that? You play that back on a computer?
We'll give it to your son, he'll tell you how.
Oh,
I'm
great, he
gonna-
will.
I'll just
Right.
end this. Yeah.
Right.